Good morning to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us via the World Wide Web on the Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView and via our website www.ttparliament.org. We welcome you to today's sitting of the House of Representatives and the continuation of the budget debate for fiscal 2017 in the House of Representatives. Already we've had contributions by some 35 members of the House of Representatives, not including the Minister of Finance, who would have presented the budget on September 30th. And we expect today that the other members who have not yet spoken will in fact make their contributions, following which we will have the beginning process of the meeting of the Standing Finance Committee, where members will go in depth into the heads of expenditure, for the 50 heads of expenditure that make up a large part of the budget. And so we take you over now to the chamber for the start of today's proceedings. We welcome you to the 7th sitting of the House in the second session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Wednesday, October 12, 2016.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here gathered for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Affirmation, announcements by the Speaker, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Tuesday, October 11, 2016, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2017. Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I rise to make my contribution, like several of my colleagues, I will create your indulgence with respect to 4410, because I intend to read parts of and make references to notes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to make my contribution as the 17th member of the opposition to speak in this debate. I wish to take this opportunity to congratulate all my colleagues in the opposition bench for their sterling contributions on this bill, an act to provide for the service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th of September 2017. Madam Speaker, it is the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the member for Siparia, who in a 3-hour contribution clinically dissected the presentation by the Honourable Minister of Finance. And importantly brought into the full glare of the public the capture of this government by the elite. Her contribution confronted the sociology of power of this government and the inevitable conclusion that it is representative of big business, conglomerate interests at the expense of the poor and vulnerable citizens. That the measures in this budget would pressure the poor and favor the wealthy. Madam Speaker, what was the condition of the economy after 1 year of the Honourable Member for Diego Martin West administration? Madam Speaker, real GDP declined by 2.1% in 2015 and a further 2.7% in 2016 is projected. fiscal deficit to decrease to 10.9% of GDP in 2016. Energy output lower by 7.1% in 2016. Oil and gas production in decline. Non-energy growth weak. The absence of major capital investment projects. World competitive ranking declined in 2016 to 94 out of 138 from 89. Current account into deficit from a surplus. External debt to increase to 11.4% of GDP in 2016. Gross official reserves down from 11.3 billion to 9.8 billion in 2016. 9.8 billion in 2015. Unemployment at 3.6%, but increasing. There's a tightened monetary policy of the central bank. The TT dollar devalued but depreciating. Foreign exchange in short supply and worsening. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago payment indebtedness is as follows. Contractors, 2 billion. Public servants back pay, 2 billion. VAT refunds due. The minister never mentioned a word in his presentation about VAT refunds. VAT refunds due 5 billion and interest on VAT refunds 0.5 billion. Madam Speaker, it is clear that the current administration, in the face of this debacle before us in terms of economic management, seeks to demonize the opposition and put the blame on the opposition. And I want to remind honorable members opposite of some of the debts left by the PNM in 2010. CLICO, 25 billion. Ministry of Housing, 8 billion. WASA, 4 billion. And I know the member for Dabadi O'Meara likes to talk about 4 billion WASA debt. That debt is a cumulative debt for over 20 years. Outstanding VAT, 2 billion. Owed contractors, 2 billion. Loan for the waterfront, 2.7 billion. Outstanding fuel subsidy, 6 billion. Loan for the Taruba Stadium, 500 million. Loan for Rapid Rail, 500 million. Petrotrin, 12.5 billion. Outstanding wage negotiations, 9 billion. Over $72 billion in outstanding debts left by the PNM in 2010. Madam Speaker, so when they whine like a turbine about the hand dealt with them, that was the hand dealt with us, dealt to us. My friend, the member for Caroni East, dealt comprehensively with the economic details, the financial details in which we left the Treasury. Madam Speaker, I just merely want to indicate a few facts in the matter. In September 2015, the foreign reserves was over 11 billion US dollars, an increase of over 2 billion in 2010. In other words, the Kamla Persad-Bissessa administration added over 2 billion US dollars to the Treasury. Further, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund stood at 5.3 billion US dollars, up from 3.1 billion US dollars in 2010. That's another 2.2 billion US dollars added. So that's 4.2 billion US dollars or 26 billion TT dollars added to the Treasury by the Kamla Persad-Bissessa administration. So these are the facts. So far from empty. These are the facts. The Treasury being empty, these are the facts. But Madam Speaker, what did we expect from the budget? Because the budget really ought to provide us with some measures and have an expectation, define the problems existing in the society, and put forward measures with a view to providing a cure for those problems in the medium and in the long term. We expected, Madam Speaker, a strategic plan for growth and diversification over the long term. We expected a strong medium-term fiscal plan. We expected the removal of impediments for doing business, seeing that there's a depreciation in our competitive ranking. We expected a divestment of non-core state enterprises, in particular those operating in the private sector space. We expected the measures to maintain and enhance the competitiveness of Trinidad and Tobago as a preferred place to do business. We expected enhanced delivery of support targeted to the most vulnerable citizens. We expected reduction in general subsidies that will benefit the entire population. We expected a budgeted revenue based on conservative oil and gas prices. We expected exchange rate adjustments, customs duties to increase across non-essential imports. We expected the property tax to be reintroduced. Madam Speaker, and we expected that the corporation tax to be increased and that taxes and duties on tobacco and spirits to be increased because that is the normal P&M approach. Madam Speaker, but what did we get? What did we get? We got a 30% tax on incremental profits in excess of TT 1 million from January 1st, 2017, a 3% property tax from January 1st, 2017, a revenue authority in 2017 to improve tax collection and reduce tax evasion, a 50% tax relief for businesses generating finance for public-private sector partnerships, an increased excise customs duty on locally manufactured tobacco and alcohol. So that's, and then of course, transfer pricing, study in progress, not expected to impact in 2017. Madam Speaker, how would this impact upon the individual? How would this impact upon the individual? Madam Speaker, the individual household will face increased costs as a result of the 5% increase in the income tax rate, the increase in the price of diesel, the reintroduction of property tax, the purchase of alcohol and tobacco products, and of course, the 7% online tax. Madam Speaker, I will have more to say because you see the Honorable Minister of Finance indicated last year that he had no intentions whatsoever of putting on an online tax. You'll see what they say is not what they do. We expect, Madam Speaker, that these budgetary measures will continue the weakening of the TT dollar and which may also serve to increase the cost of a wide range of goods that a household have to purchase, given the extensive range of imported goods on offer within the local economy. Madam Speaker, at the individual level, while the need to increase our savings is well recognized, it is unlikely in these challenging times when household incomes are challenged that individuals will commence savings unless there's a link to some form of incentive for the tax deduction granted for tax-free government bonds in the past years. Madam Speaker, so this is the status of affairs. So this budget, in the words of one of my constituents, this budget is heavy on description, but sadly lacking in these prescriptive measures to bring this economy back to real and sustained growth. And it is not lost on the people of this country that the 2016-17 budget is a shameless rehash of the PNM's first budget in the Rowley administration. It is an affront to the citizenry. It is a reflection of the true PNM, lackluster, lackadaisical, and incompetent, and quite simply out of its depth when it comes to taking Trinidad and Tobago forward. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Leader of Government Business late yesterday evening spoke about returning the country to good governance. And I want to ask her rhetorically, whether withdrawing the Malcolm Jones case prematurely from adjudication before the courts of Trinidad and Tobago was good governance. Whether the firing of Jawala Rambaran as central bank governor without even the modicum of providing reasons was good governance. Madam Speaker, I intend to provide later on the good governance P&M style. Madam Speaker, the honourable member indicated that truth and loyalty was impossible on this side. You know, I wondered when I listened to that, and I have an excellent working relationship with the member. Since when those on the other side become paragons of virtue? I ask whether the perpetrator of the hoax that goes by the Emailgate hoax, whether that was truth and whether it was loyalty, and to what? Madam Speaker, I think my colleague, the honourable member for Chaguanas East, raised an issue, and it is in The Economist of September 10 to 16, 2016. I myself had planned to raise it, because there is an article very interesting called The Art of the Lie in dealing with the American-style politics. And it deals with the concept of post-truth, that you tell what is untrue, but what is untrue becomes the issue, and truth goes by the wayside. I will just read one paragraph at page 9. Feelings, not facts, are what matter in this sort of campaigning. Their opponents' disbelief validates the us versus them mindset that outsider candidates thrive on. And if your opponent focuses on trying to show your facts are wrong, they have to fight on the ground you have chosen. The more Remain campaigners attack the Leave campaign exaggerated claim that EU membership cost Britain £350 million a week, the longer they kept the magnitude of those costs in the spotlight. So you tell an untruth, and you perpetuate that untruth by keeping it in the public eye. Emailgate was the best example locally. But you see, Madam Speaker, we have a history of that when one understands the history of this country and the politics. In 1981, the infamous Baptist letter, in which Carl Terence Hudson Phillips, Queen's Counsel, was demonized by the incumbent regime at the time. Yes, afraid Carl, but the Baptist letter was used, which was another hoax perpetrated by the PNM in 1981. And then, of course, the further demonizing of A.N.R. Robinson when there was an article in which they indicated that he had brought a ship with guns to Tobago. So you have to understand the DNA of this administration, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I have been humbled and privileged to serve 3 times my country in my capacity as a minister. As Minister of Public Utilities, 1995 to 2000, Minister of Human Development and Youth, 2000 to 2001, and 2012 to 2015, Minister of the Environment and Water Resources. Several of my parliamentary colleagues, the member for Aruka Moloney, the member for Caroni Central, the member for Siparia, the member for Diego Martin West, the member for Diego Martin Northeast, have also distinction of serving even for longer periods as ministers of government. Madam Speaker, and I say so with all modesty and humility, that since 1995, all the major improvements in the water and wastewater sector and in some other utility sectors was with non-PNM governments. And since 1995, Madam Speaker, I have been instrumental as a minister in bringing forward innovation, change, and science to the sector. So you understand, Madam Speaker, that I listened intensely to the Honourable Minister of Public Utilities when he made his contribution to this debate. Last year, I felt he was suffering from newness as he made wild and spurious allegations, and I hope that he would come to terms with the gravitas of the portfolio which he holds. Madam Speaker, for his edification, when I was chosen to be the Minister of Public Utilities in 1995, Barry Barnes was the outgoing minister. Ralph Maraj was there for a short while, having been placed there at the death of Maurice Marshall. You may recall that, Madam Speaker. So before Ralph Maraj was removed. So men of caliber and competence occupy the portfolio. Oil budget price, the price at which oil was budgeted in 1995 to 2000 is as follows, Madam Speaker. 95 to 96 budget, US $17.50. 96 to 97, US $20. 97 to 98 budget price, US $19. 98 to 99, US $14.10. 1999 to 2000, US $16. 2000 to 2001, US $22. So where is this whining, this complaining you're complaining about when we ran the government with a surplus, with oil price budgeted at these prices? You are $48 you have budgeted. $48. Madam Speaker, our mantra then in the utility sector was that the quality of our democracy is measured not by the contentment of the affluent, but rather how the poor amongst us have access to the basic amenities, housing, shelter, educational opportunities, economic opportunities. Madam Speaker, in subsequent to that, and I will go on, I read Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize winner in economics. And he viewed development as freedom. But it appears to me that the PNM views development as suppression of freedom. Madam Speaker, and he says at page, Amartya Sen in his book, Development as Freedom, says at page 7, at page 5, if freedom is what development advances, then there is a major argument for concentrating on the overarching objective rather than some particular means or some specially chosen list of instruments. Viewing development in terms of expanding substantive freedoms directs attention to the ends that make development important rather than merely to some of the means that inter alia play a prominent part in the process. The point, Madam Speaker, is that when you have these freedoms and opportunities to participate in the process, it redounds to the benefit of the society. Madam Speaker, we had, in that period, and I want to say this quickly, we had a first-class team in which we worked together, with oil prices being what it was, to develop the public utility sector. Mr. Valence Patino, Mr. Emmanuel George, Mr. Harjinder Atwal, Mr. Kancham Kanhai. Madam Speaker, it is through this group and this team and this synergy we were able to transform a postal department that is called TT Post, that the Honourable Member mentioned, into what the World Bank in 1999 indicated that it was a benchmark for small island developing states. It stands to today the only public sector transformation that ever took place in this country. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member spoke about the RIC. If he were to go and look at the debates, he would see that we brought the RIC into being in order to provide a regulatory framework in that period for service providers. But the Honourable Member don't know about these things. he provided a bookkeeping, a written transactional presentation. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Planning, my good friend, made a big song and dance about the Chaguanas Development Authority, saying that contracts just prior to the election of September 7th was awarded. And justifiable so. She may have legitimate cause for concern. However, how can the honorable member reconcile her indignation with that signing of those contracts with the interim operating arrangement that brought the English firm Severn Trent into Trinidad and Tobago just a mere few days before the election in 1995? How can the member reconcile the Murkarat may have signing of a contract to bring the Israeli influence into Wassa just a mere days before the elections in 2010? Madam Speaker, so reconcile. You're not a paragon of virtue, but what you seek to do is to demonize the opposition. Madam Speaker, we did a series of things in that period. We upgraded the Caroni treatment plant, and we upgrade and improve the water supply, and we coined the phrase "water for all." We did the Greater Port of Spain sewage study. We did, and then we completed it by action. We built the Beetham sewage treatment plant that stands still today. Prior to that, there was a plume of sewage that entered the Gulf of Paria. We also engaged DHV consultants, Madam Speaker, for an integrated water resource management policy. That is something that they're now seeking to embark. If Minister Penny Beckles continue that program, government is a continuum. So if you don't know, do not be misled by your technocrats, Madam Speaker. So then came the PNM, 2002 to 2010, Madam Speaker. A whole period of inertia. Their main objective was separating water from wastewater. Same thing they're going back on, separating the Water Resources Agency from the Water and Sewerage Authority. I have no problem with that, because we had plans of creating a flood management authority so that you take water as a resource with the one water concept. But enter the PP government, and I'm trying to quickly, Madam Speaker, and my colleague, Minister Emmanuel George, as he then was, Minister of Public Utilities, started another period of growth and development in the water and wastewater sector. So, Madam Speaker, any period of development is associated with non-PNM governments in the water and wastewater sector. And you see, the honorable member for Dabadi O'Meara has a bad habit of seeking to perpetuate that there was discrimination against by the People's Partnership Government against PNM constituencies. In the water and wastewater sector, I can say unequivocally that was not so. And I have the facts to prove it. Madam Speaker, I want to quickly go through the 41 constituencies for purposes of the record. Port of Spain South, an investment of $26.7 million was made. Wow. Port of Spain St. Anne's East, $20.1 million. Port of Spain St. Anne's West, $2,230,000. Diego Martin Northeast is $11.1 million. Diego Martin West, $44.5 million. Diego Martin Central, $16.196 million. Lavantil West, $8.5 million. Wow. 8.5. You see, Madam Speaker, wherever there was a need, we fulfill that need. And I can make it available. Labre, if you want to find out, I will Labre, $7.65 million. Tobago East, Tobago East, $64.2 million. And all he did, Madam Speaker, all he did was to continue the Hermitage program, and government is a continuum. All the plans were in place for $6 million. All the plans. And he comes to talk about you jump in front and you jump behind. Listen to me. You better march in front because I'm marching behind. Tobago West, 95.8.
I want to hear the
Members, I know you all are very, very keen on hearing the report about your particular constituencies, but I think if we listen in silence, Chaguanas West should get to everybody. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Tobago West, I was saying, $95.8 million. And Madam Speaker, I can make this list available together with the breakdown for any member of the government who so desire. But I would just wanted to indicate this attempt that you're taking, that where you are planned to demonize, and it was on the basis of need. It was not on the basis of geographical location. Madam Speaker, I would have thought that the Honourable Member for the Minister of Public Utilities would have told this Parliament what was the provision to provide water for the Caribbean gas chemical plant in La Brea. I have asked on 3 occasions the Honourable Prime Minister for a statement to be made on that, because I have an interest in the provision of water to the people in southwest Trinidad. And I fear that under that minister who is clueless about the sector, that they will take water from the public water supply and provide it to industry as they have done previously. But there has been no answer forthcoming. I think there's an obligation on the part of the member for Port of Spain North to provide that statement to this Parliament, and he has abdicated that responsibility or is yet to get instructions from the Prime Minister. Madam Speaker, I go now to the minister, to page 77 of the public sector investment program. You know, the minister of Public Utilities does not do his homework. And it says, the socio-economic development of the country continues to place increasing demands for safe and reliable supply of electric power. Demand is expected to grow from 1,400 megawatts to 3,000 megawatts by 2013. 1,400 to 3,000? That is, another 100% plus? 100% increase? How is that going to take place in 2 years, Madam Speaker? So, Madam Speaker, I question the integrity of that figure before us. And so, therefore, in order to find out what is really happening, I went to TN Tech, and they provided the 2016-2025 energy sales and peak demand forecast. Madam Speaker, this is what they have to say at page 10, executive summary, page 1. Over the forecast period, that is 2016 to 2025, keep in mind, they said from 1,400 to 3,000. Over the forecast period, the system maximum demand is expected to rise by 43% from 1,434 megawatts in 2016 to 25. Where you get the figure of 3,000? Where do you get that? You make up, you're clueless, or you intend to build another power plant with Sural again in Tabana Tech Park? What it is, Madam Speaker? What, is it that you're going to build a power plant in Barataria as you indicated? What it is you're doing? Minister had no answer for that, Madam Speaker. Clueless, clueless bookkeeper. Now we turn to the wastewater sector, Madam Speaker. Because parallel with improvement in the water sector, you do improvement in the wastewater sector. 1966, Lockjoy. 2000, the Beetham sewage plant, tertiary treated. Prior to that, as I said, 4 ponds, raw sewage going into the Gulf. So we together with the Minister of Planning and her successor, no doubt, will follow that. we got a loan for the Water and Sewerage Authority, a multi-phase loan of $546 million. And we began a phased process of putting things in place for the sewage sector, because there's a toxic dump being created in Trinidad, Madam Speaker. 18 sewage plants currently dumped into the Caroni River, which we produce 75 million gallons a day. So that is why the Malabar plant is important. That is why in Sunkist in Philippines, the Honorable Member for San Fernando West, I know he has his head hot, so I won't trouble him too much. There are several private developments there that has a real problem. Raw sewage entering the system. So that is why you have the San Fernando wastewater treatment plant. Madam Speaker, I made a statement to the Senate on Tuesday, November 8, 2014. The member comes here and plays that he doesn't even know about that. He's taking everything. I know government is a continuum, but you must understand where you come from. This Malabar wastewater treatment plant and collection system at a total cost of $620 million. The construction of the San Fernando wastewater treatment plant and collection system at a cost of $654 million. You understand? The largest ever loan, as I am reminded by my colleague, by the IDB, largest ever in the history. And the procurement process, IDB guidelines, the evaluation IDB guidelines, transparency and objectivity. That's governance, transparency and objectivity, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, you see, you have to clean up the environment. And since 1966 to 2000 to 2014, nothing was done unless there's a non-P&M government in place. Madam Speaker, but certain information has come to me. Madam Speaker, with respect to the San Fernando wastewater treatment plant, Madam Speaker, this is what is happening. And I view this very seriously. Madam Speaker, this contract was commenced on December 15, 2014. A contract for the sum, as I indicated, of $654 million. And is expected to be completed by December 13, 2014. Madam Speaker, by letter dated 3rd March 2016, the contractor issued a termination notice to WASA and invoked clause 16.3 of the FIDE contract for termination of the contract due to non-payment. What was the Minister of Dabadi did? The 3rd of March. WASA, 2016, WASA rejected the termination notice and called for dialogue with the contractor. Meetings were conducted with the IDB on the 5th, 25th, and 31st of May 2016. The IDB advised that there are no provisions under the contract to share costs or provide additional payments to the contractor. Madam Speaker, you understand? They went to IDB, that is the chairman of the Water and Sewerage Authority, who, anointed by the Minister of Public Utilities, behaves as an executive chairman. So they went to these meetings, and the IDB said no provision for any sharing of costs. The contract does not provide for that. But lo and behold, Madam Speaker, the chairman of WASA, one Romney Thomas, who, through the active and or passive anointment, more passive I believe, anointment of the Minister of Public Utilities, behaves like an executive chairman. And he led the charge to get extra money for the contractor. Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker, the chairman of WASA, leading the charge for an international contractor to get extra money on a $654 million contract.
Where the fireman?
Madam Speaker,
Members, the sitting is almost an hour in session. I think members have been given sufficient time to settle down and abide by the standing orders. A practice is developing of particular members shouting across the floor. This is not a boxing ring. And members who continue in such behavior are going to feel the censure of the chair. Continue, please, Chaguanas.
Madam Speaker, I hope you give me injury time. Madam Speaker, to my consternation, at a recent board meeting of the Water and Sewage Authority, the WASA board gave approval for a $9 million ex gratia payment to the contractor, Acciona Agua. $9 million. Madam Speaker, when I heard that, after going through all this pressure to attempt to solve the problems in this country, I know that there was trouble ahead. So I want to read into the record, Madam Speaker, a letter that I wrote to the country representative of the IDB. Attention, Mr. Thomas Bermudez. Query for investigation, IDB-funded wastewater treatment plant in San Fernando, Trinidad and Tobago. I refer to an IDB-funded wastewater project in San Fernando in the amount of $654 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars. This project is being undertaken by the state-owned Water and Sewage Authority and is presently under construction. In furtherance of the project, WASA completed all relevant due diligence and upgrades to its procurement system in order to satisfy IDB procurement policies. To quote, to grant transparency, competition, equality of opportunity, and the principles of economy, efficiency, and integrity in the procurement of IDB finance operations. However, it has come to my attention that the Board of Commissioners of WASA, in an initiative led by its chairman, has acted in a manner intended to subvert the agreed procurement practices as between itself and the IDB. This action may also amount to a misprocurement under the applicable loan documentation. Specifically, following the procurement process, a tender was awarded to AAA Wastewater Treatment Plant in association with Atlantic Wastewater Treatment Limited. The tender price would have been a material and significant component in the evaluation and determination of this award. The IDB would also have reviewed and accepted that the evaluation of the tender was in alignment with established procurement practices. However, it is my understanding that WASA Board of Commissioners has taken the decision to award an ex gratia payment of $9 million, approximately $60,500,000 to Acciona Agua Treatment Plant Limited for a single component of this project. This action, by itself, constitutes an undermining of the economic and financial viability of the project, and should this approach continue, any hope for economy and deficiency in the execution of this project will be further obliterated. The making of this substantial ex gratia payment to the contractor without any legal obligation to do so not only defeats the procurement process to which the parties agreed, but attenuates the values upon which IDB funding is based. In these circumstances, and to secure the interests of all stakeholders, I ask that this apparent attempt to subvert the agreed procurement process be investigated and remedied with urgency. And, Madam Speaker, and I indicate that I am available to assist the IDB in the interests of our citizenry, our country, and the bank, so that the laudable objectives of this project are fully satisfied. Madam Speaker, it ex gratia. Ex gratia, I will give you,
Thanks, yeah.
ex gratia is by favor. What is the chairman of WASA, Romney Thomas, doing negotiating and causing the senior executives of that water utility to genuflect? He's bullying and intimidating them. Like the member for Dabadi Omira, Madam Speaker, the member for Dabadi Omira, went to a meeting of the Operations Committee, and he said, you know, as a soldier, when you conquer a territory, you must remove all destabilizing forces. And he called the name of a sitting senior executive who was a key in all these IDB loans in order to force him to bend. So I want to tell the honorable member, let him get up and say if it's not otherwise, because I know the date, time and place and who was there.
Honorable member for Chaguanas West, in terms of imputing improper motives to the member on the other side, I would ask you to withdraw those statements. Having regard to your seniority, I'm sure that you can put it over another way. And in terms of certain words that have been used, I think they're somewhat unparliamentary, like words like bullying and so on. I don't think that those words should be used in those chambers. Again, given your experience, I'm sure you can find another way.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No. Madam Speaker, yes, Madam Speaker, my colleague, I just want to complete this point. So,
just before you go on, remember I asked you to withdraw.
Yeah, I withdraw.
Yes.
I withdraw, I have no problem. He knows what I'm talking about. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, my colleague, the member for Orupooch East, spoke about Stone Street Capital. Stone Street Capital is a matter that I raised in 2006. Stone Street Capital is reflective of the revolving door that takes place between the conglomerate element and the PNM when they are in government. You will recall, Madam Speaker, you had one man being the chairman of HDC, chairman of Clico Investment Bank, chairman of the Home Mortgage Bank, took money from the HDC, $60 million, put it in CIB, then took a loan and bought the Home Mortgage Bank shares. Madam Speaker, but there was a sequel to that. Because in 2008, that same chairman of the various, had to resign prior, but then was the 7 million Stone Street Capital HMB shares bought, got having bought those shares, he had to sell it to NIB because the government of the day was against that kind of purchase, that underhand subversive purchase. But, Madam Speaker, he sold those shares for the princely sum of $132 million. $132 million, Madam Speaker. So that therefore, the revolving door, the elite support system.
But for Chaguanas West, your original 45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself of it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, I notice you didn't give me any injury time. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I am dealing with the predator's ball. And you see, that incarnation was not the only incarnation, you know. Many of us will remember Viveka Holdings. Viveka Holdings. And I would read from the Express of July 15, 2012, an article by Michael Harris. The way we were. Madam Speaker, in April 1992, the People's National Movement, led by Patrick Manning, appointed Mr. Montai, who was the party treasurer, to be chairman of the board of TNTEC. Shortly after, the TNTEC board appointed Mr. Montai as chairman of the management committee of the TNTEC Pension Fund. In February 1995, the management committee of the pension fund took a decision to sell off its entire portfolio of equity stock, including 5.7 million shares in Republic Bank. On March 10, the entire equity portfolio was offered for sale on the stock exchange, and Viveka Holdings purchased all the Republic Bank shares. When Republic learned of this transaction, it refused to register Viveka as the lawful bondholders of the former TNTEC shares and sued Clico, Montai, Viveka, and the management committee. CLICO's response came on July 1st, 1996, when it served notice to the bank to summon an extraordinary general meeting for the purpose of replacing 8 members. What is the... So eventually, Madam Speaker, that matter had to be settled. And in an opinion by Mark Morgan, when it was settled, Mr. Montai, having raided the TNTech pension fund, walked away with over $143 million.
Member, can I ask you to use another word other than read it?
Well, Madam Speaker, well, it was a predatory purchase. I will indicate it was a breach of trust by Mr. Montai in the purchase of those shares, Madam Speaker. But in the language of stocks, it was a raid. But if you want to say it's unparliamentary, that's fine. Madam Speaker, I want to warn the population. I want to warn the population because there is another attempt by this revolving door politics, Madam Speaker. It is happening with the sale of the cable and wireless shares of 49%. The union have called upon the government, written to the Prime Minister. So the union have called upon, why is there a shroud of secrecy surrounding this 49% sale? But we will wait and see, Madam Speaker, but we are monitoring because that's another elitist approach to grab the prize jewels of this economy. Madam Speaker, I want to make reference to a text entitled The End of Power by Moses Naim. And he says at page 49, events of recent years have revived the concern that power in many or most countries is ultimately held by an oligarchy. A small number of top players that enjoy disproportionate control over wealth and resources and whose interests are intimately woven, whether in blunt or subtle ways, into government policy. Madam Speaker, Simon Johnson, an MIT professor and former chief economist of the IMF, drew on his experience to argue that everywhere the fund was called upon to intervene, it found oligarchies seeking to shelter themselves and offload the burdens of reform onto other constituencies. So that is what it is. The oligarchy is alive and well in this country. And there is an oligarchy that is now putting forward people within and bringing them from the boardroom into the state room and wielding power. And there's a convergence between media power to influence the electorate. And that therefore, for example, what leader of the opposition say is alive and well. So we have the example of Mr. Montai. We have the example of what is happening in TSTT right now. And then we have the example of what is happening at the National Gas Company. And then we have a supporting conglomerate infrastructure that supports the power of the oligarchy utilizing the media of this country. And I have more to say on that. Madam Speaker, much more to say on that. I would have wanted to speak about the online shopping in which the Honorable Minister, the member for Diego Martin West, tweeted last year. That is a creation of the media. You know? Creation of the media. Madam Speaker, the minister that indicated that, I want to ask, why the change of heart? Last year, you did not support it, but this year you supported it. It reminded me of Jack Warner. Yesterday was yesterday, and today is today. That is why you cannot trust this government, what they say. Same thing with the car industry, Madam Speaker. Same thing with the car industry. They remove the 6-year period for cars to put it over 4 years, so they can, the used car dealer industry in this country cannot compete with new cars dealers in this country. Another big people party decision. Madam Speaker, when you listen to the members, you would think that they are all paragons of virtue. And when I want to tell the honourable member for Diego Martin West, look at Cabinet Note that deals with the transitioning of the Ministry of Local Government. Because what it deals with, sole selective decision made by Cabinet for Advanced Dynamics Limited to the tune of $1.996 million through sole selective tendering. So that therefore, to do what? To organize consultations for the Ministry of Local Government. So don't play that you're virtuous here. You know, so advance. And you know what the email said? From Desra Bascom to Jenny Myers. Hello all. Minister wants us to give Andrew his check this week. Regards, P.S. Andrew? No, I know two Andrew. Prince Andrew. I don't know him, but I know of him. And I know a former UNC Senator, Andrew Gabriel. Those are the two people that I know who carry the name Andrew, Madam Speaker. So you understand? So there is a campaign manager. So, Madam Speaker, in how much time?
2 more minutes.
Madam Speaker, and I really am disappointed that this government is taking this approach to the Ramlila. All we need is a half-an-hour extension to 11 o'clock, but you refuse to do that. Madam Speaker, it is clear that this government and the measures, there is no hope in the face of difficulty, no hope in the face of the uncertainty. There is no hope whatsoever. This government is rudderless and without direction. But however, Madam Speaker, in the words of Winston Churchill, as he remarked in 1932, and I quote, "There is still time to bring back the sunshine which has been darkened by clouds of human folly. We can roll back the dark clouds of uncertainty and allow the rays of sunshine to peer through in order to return to a more balanced and sustainable path of economic growth." End of quote. Madam Speaker, the local elections due will present that opportunity for sunshine once more in this country of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As usual, it is indeed a privilege to have the opportunity to contribute to a debate in this House. And I'd like to start this morning by thanking all of those who contributed over the past year of the PNM administration being in office and governing Trinidad and Tobago. Because every right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, acknowledges that we came into office in a period of difficulty from a financial point of view. And at the end of that year, Madam Speaker, I am happy to report, and the public accepts, that Trinidad and Tobago sailed through that year of difficulty in a most stable fashion. And we thank, first of all, for that, the Minister of Finance for guiding the economy.
Thank you.
It would be remiss of us, Madam Speaker, not to thank the public service and the public servants who assisted us. In particular, the permanent secretaries who rose to the challenge of a new government being in place, and persons such as myself who were new members and assisted in providing that level of stability and guidance that brought us to this point. I also would like to thank my cabinet colleagues for supporting each other in difficult times and for us coming out of that year all the better for it. I thank the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for Diego Martin West, for providing a level of leadership that Trinidad and Tobago, and not only Trinidad and Tobago, the CARICOM required at the time that we've gone through in the past year. We thank the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for appreciating and understanding what it is that as a country and as a nation we were faced with. And the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who show resilience and an appreciation as we began to unravel and as we began to find what had been left by the previous administration. And finally, in my vote of thanks at the beginning, and I've used a different approach, I thank my constituents of Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, for their continued support and for their understanding over the past year. Because, Madam Speaker, I would like to put forward a proposition, and it is a proposition I hope that would be accepted by all right-thinking citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and hopefully those that have the privilege to serve in this House and to serve those that they represent in this House on both sides. Ultimately, Madam Speaker, my proposition is what we do here today is for the future generations of Trinidad and Tobago, and for our children and for our grandchildren, because we are merely the gatekeepers at this current point in time, Madam Speaker. And after having gone through that and taken the time at the outset to thank all those who have contributed to keeping Trinidad and Tobago stable and afloat in the past year, I turn now to a very serious, disturbing, unparliamentary, immature, low-level, unbecoming incident that I actually personally think was a disgusting one that has stained our history and stained this House and stained the souls of those who have served in this House before, that took place in this parliamentary chamber yesterday. And I'd like to call upon all right-thinking persons who have offered themselves for service and who have been elected to this House to distance themselves from that very unbecoming, disgusting behavior of Oropuch East yesterday, where the member for Oropuch East, where the 48 for...
Is it a stand?
Disgusting.
Yes, member for Chaguanas West, the standing order.
48-4. 416, Madam Speaker.
In terms of 48-4 insulting and offensive language, I hold that there was no such offensive and insulting language. I also hold that there's been no imputing of improper motive.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the truth is those on the outside who saw, heard, listened, and were exposed to it have already made up their minds, independently of what is said in this House and outside, that that type of behavior and the threatening language that continues to come from the member of Oropuch East continues. It is unacceptable, in my humble opinion and suggestion, Madam Speaker, for persons to bring the children of any member who has taken a decision of him and herself to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago in this manner, and the manner that was exposed yesterday. And I decry it, and I say that it is most unbecoming, and I denounce it, and I call upon all the right-thinking members of society to follow suit. But on reflection overnight, Madam Speaker, and thinking about how low a level we had reached yesterday in our history with that contribution, I reflected on the 10th session that we've just come out of, because we're now in the 11th session of Parliament. And I realized that it is something that is really a continuum of what carried forward from the 10th session, when I reflected on how the Honourable Member for Diego Martin West was attacked, and his family personally attacked in that session. So I stand here today, Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect to all, calling upon all members going forward in the future to kindly refrain from the personal attacks on families. If it is something you want to continue, that's your choice. But it is something we denounce on this side. And I'd like to say to the member for San Fernando West, who is my comrade, my colleague, my brother, my friend, that there's a saying in local parlance: you don't stone a mango tree that's not bearing fruit. And I'd like to suggest that the reason that happened is because you're doing an excellent job and you have our full support. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I think it is my responsibility and duty to take this opportunity now to talk about revenue and expenditure in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular to help the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago respectfully, and those who may be a bit confused over the contributions they may have heard in this House over the past week with respect to the issue of revenue, and to take us back to where we started, which is the budget speech of the member of Diego Martin Northeast. where he told us about our revenue situation. Madam Speaker, it is accepted that in Trinidad and Tobago over the past few decades, the majority of our revenue as a government has come from oil and gas. It is also accepted, because it's historical now, that our revenues from oil and gas have been drastically reduced. And in those circumstances, we're dealing with a very dire situation, which we managed to find some stability to. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance told us, looking at government revenues as a whole, the reduction in current revenue, that is to say revenue from taxation, royalties on oil and profits from state enterprises over the last 2 years is of the order of 20 billion, from 57 billion in 2014 to 37 billion in 2016, a decrease of 35%. He told us that we've lost over 20 billion in annual revenue from 2014. He told us above that when it came to oil and gas revenue, we dropped from 17.6 billion in 2014 to 1.7 billion in 2016. Madam Speaker, respectfully, anyone faced with that reduction in revenue has to take very serious measures, but measures that are taken in a context of an understanding of trying not to destabilize the ship, because you've had a drop in our oil and gas revenues of 92%. And people will understand in Trinidad and Tobago what that means. Another area that we came in and found, Madam Speaker, that has not been emphasized, and I'd like to take the opportunity now very briefly to touch on it, is Trinidad and Tobago moved away from really being an oil production country to one that is selling natural gas. Natural gas to our LNG producers, natural gas to other downstreamers in ammonia, urea, and the other likes of commodities. And what we found when we were in opposition between 2010 and 2015 is a lot of complaints from the downstream industry that there seemed to be a curtailment situation. At the time, we were told by the then Minister of Energy, no, it's nothing. It is normal maintenance on platforms, it's scheduled maintenance here, it is unscheduled maintenance here, and that is what we were fed by those on the other side between 2010 and 2015. However, when we came into office on the 11th of September 2015, what we found was a completely different scenario to what they were broadcasting to the public at large. The member for Chaguanas West a short while ago talked about the CGCL project and said that how he's been waiting on the ministerial statement. I assure you the ministerial statement will be given as soon as the end of the budget. We had to get it to a position where it had been concluded based on what we'd found. So that ministerial statement is coming. Madam Speaker, the position with curtailment that the public needs to know is there was a very serious curtailment of our natural gas in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is what they hid from us for the period of time. And that curtailment led to hundreds of millions of dollars in claims being brought against the NGC for breach of contracts that are being dealt with, and a number of other things that we will speak about in the coming weeks that they hid from the public during the period 2010 to 2015. But the reason I raise this, Madam Speaker, is in the context of revenue, and for the country to understand, because those on the other side would have had us not properly understand what was taking place between 2010 and 2015. For the country to understand that with a reduction in the production of natural gas, we also were faced with a very serious curtailment issue. What we also found when we came into office, and I heard them talking a short while ago about state chairmen, and there was one who was a state chairman of a company called the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, a Mr. Singh. And what we heard and what we found, and I'd like to tell the public of Trinidad and Tobago at this point, because NGC provided those on the other side with a piggy bank between 2010 and 2015 that was nothing short of being looted. According to the published annual reports from 2008, NGC proposed and paid the following dividends, Madam Speaker. In 2008, NGC paid $300 million. In 2009, NGC's paid
48 for the word looted like raided. I think it's unparliamentary.
Member, if you could just withdraw that word and repeat it in a manner that will be more consistent.
Much obliged, Madam Speaker. They emptied the coffers at NGC from the period 2010 to 2015 in a most undignified manner. In 2008, $300 million were paid in dividends. In 2009, $650 million was paid. In 2010, $350 million was paid. There was a change in 2011 under the chairmanship of Mr. Chan Chedi Singh. And from the 2011 annual report, Madam Speaker, the amount of $915 million was paid. And what they began to do, and the public needs to be aware of this, is declare retroactive dividends. So in 2011, they took $915 million, saying it was for 2009 and 2010. That is a very unusual way of declaring dividends. Exactly. So in 2011, in addition to the $550 million they took for 2011, they went backwards in time, and the public needs to know this. They went backwards and said for 2009 and 2010, we'll take a $915 million in addition to what had been taken before. In 2012, they paid out $1.24 billion, which comprised of 185. Again, they go back to 2009. So in 2012, what we found them doing is still trying to taking dividends and declaring it for 2009. So they had 3 bites of the 2009 cherry all the way in 2012. And what they did over the period of time is they took out over $10 billion from the national gas company's retained earnings. $10 billion in cash.
Who is that, Chan Chedi Singh?
That the board led by Chan Chedi Singh for the national gas company. So what we met when we came into office, Madam Speaker, and it's important that the public understand this, every single overdraft facility available to the government bumped up to the max. And not only that, the crown jewel of the state of Trinidad and Tobago, NGC, had its cash coffers purged and raided by the former board of NGC, which we found out subsequently has a very close relationship with SIS. So now what we find, Madam Speaker, and when you look at NGC and you look at the drop in its profits after tax, is that from a revenue point of view, it is no longer in a position where it can uphold singularly the energy revenues for Trinidad and Tobago. Also, the other initiatives they had put in place from an energy position have also affected our revenue position. Then moving, Madam Speaker, if I may, to the position with respect to expenditure. And a lot of comment has been made both in this House and outside of the House with respect to government and expenditure. And we've sat here over the past week and we've listened to all of the members opposite go through, as they see their duty, line items on the expenditure for the upcoming fiscal year 2016 into 2017 and say, they slash here, the P&M slash there, they've cut the expenditure here, they've cut the expenditure there, as though that is a bad thing. What they've engaged in, and I'm telling the public at large, is attempts at fear-mongering. You're going to lose jobs here, you're going to lose jobs here. Look how they cut expenditure here, they cut expenditure there. But of course, if one understands that your revenue has dropped by the figures I've said, 92% in your energy sector, 35% overall, what does one do? What the UNC is declaring to the public is they would continue to uphold and put their hat higher than it can hang and higher than it can reach, and they would continue that level of expenditure. Well, on behalf of this side and on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to applaud the Minister of Finance for reducing our expenditure in the last fiscal year by $11 billion. $11 billion was reduced without capsizing the country. And we on this side are grateful for that.
They couldn't do that.
No job losses, job preservation, not the way that was done when there was money in the treasury by those on the other side, as we heard. When they came in within 3 months, slashing 10,000 jobs. No, where we've had that drop in revenue.
With full disclosure.
With full disclosure, for the first time to the public of Trinidad and Tobago, we have reduced expenditure in the first year of being in office by $11 billion, and Trinidad and Tobago continues to float on a stable, even keel. I have seen in the newspapers, and in particular the newspaper of the Sunday Express on the 2nd of October, Madam Speaker, an article that is titled "Overspending Not Addressed in the Budget" by a Mr. Alim Khan, and he's quoting a Mr. Nigel Batiste.
Overspending.
And he's accusing the government in this budget of overspending, when we've heard those on the other side say the exact opposite for the last week. Why a slash here? Why a slash there? I'd like to put it to the public commentators to read the documents before you make commentary, especially when you hold positions of responsibility, and don't be irresponsible. In the last fiscal year, we cut expenditure. We did not slash it by $11 billion. And we continue to reduce expenditure in the manner being called upon by the economic experts. Mr. Batiste said, overall, I would conclude that the budget again places a social responsibility ahead of the economic realities. As a result, I believe an opportunity was missed to address many critical areas of overspending, while the assumptions underlying the revenue numbers are open to question and maybe even unrealistic. The proposed expenditure is almost certain. As such, the deficit can be better stated as not being less than $6 billion. Madam Speaker, I respectfully propose, in light of what I've just said, that the government has in fact done exactly what Mr. Batiste has called for, but we've done it in a most responsible manner, and that is reduced the expenditure of the government by $11 billion in our first year. And we will continue to reduce in the areas where there's wastage. We will continue to reduce in the areas to achieve value for money for Trinidad and Tobago. We also saw, Madam Speaker, so the point being that we are reducing expenditure. We will continue to reduce expenditure, but we will do so in a most responsible manner, and not an irresponsible manner of slashing jobs, as they keep harping on the other side, and not an irresponsible manner of granting contracts where it shouldn't be granted. And we will prioritize the projects that are best for the future generations of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Madam Speaker, what I'd like to suggest is that the scare tactics that are being used, no heed is given to it, no attention is given to it. And what I'd like to now move to, Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect, is a discourse on what we have done and what we intend to do. What we have done in the first year and what we intend to do to better Trinidad and Tobago for the future generations. Having spoken about a serious gas curtailment issue, Madam Speaker, we as a government did not put our heads down. We as a government did not bury our heads in the sand, as appears to have happened on the other side. What we went out and did is we looked for innovative ways that have never been achieved. Never in the history of Trinidad and Tobago has there been achieved. We've heard about Lauren Manatee for years. Everybody knows about Lauren Manatee. We felt it was going nowhere. Lauren Manatee is what you call cross-border gas. Some of it lies in Trinidad, some of it lies in Venezuela. What we did under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister is we went across border. For the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, in an innovative manner to assist and to solve our gas curtailment issues, we went across border to establish, re-establish, re-engage, and to have conversation with the government of Venezuela. And I am happy to report to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that those conversations are going extremely well with Venezuela. We're exploring the monetizing of the gas from the Dragon field, which is wholly owned by Venezuela, onshore in Trinidad and Tobago. And that would be the first time this has happened. And that is only one of the initiatives of this PNM-led administration, what we've been working over in the past year, that will help the future generations of Trinidad and Tobago. We've heard a lot being hinted and suggested and very snide remarks being made about sandals over on the other side. I would like to take this opportunity to endorse, and we hear it again from Oropuchis, he can't help himself, calling it scandals. We on this side endorse a project from sandals because we on this side recognize, and I think one of the problems that they have is sandals is one of the most successful Caribbean-owned companies in this region, if not the most successful wholly owned Caribbean initiative. So we haven't gone outside to the various other big hotel conglomerates. We've come homegrown to sandals out of Jamaica. We've begun conversations with them that are going very well. And let me help the public of Trinidad and Tobago understand by giving two of the best examples that are not hypothetical examples. Go and ask the government of Grenada. Go and ask the government of Barbados. When they were suffering with their economies, what helped boost the whole economy of Grenada and the whole economy of Barbados? It was the bringing of sandals to their various sovereign states. And what has happened with the Antigua matter, that is a matter that is a dispute, that is a matter that we understand is in arbitration. But the point is, we will come to disputes, we'll come to the Beetham wastewater plant, we'll come to what you all did with OAS in a short while. Madam Speaker, sandals will bring airlift to Tobago. Sandals will bring a boost to our agricultural sector. We have had discussions with them. They are looking to up to 85% of their food intake being provided in Trinidad and Tobago, firstly in Tobago. The boost that will have. What happens when sandals comes into your economy, Madam Speaker, is it uplifts the whole of the hospitality industry. It is not focused there alone. We are going to deal with wastewater. We are going to deal with uplifting electricity. We're dealing with desalination. The people of Tobago and also the people of Trinidad embrace the idea of this project. And we will get to the negotiation on the terms that are best for Trinidad and Tobago. The point I would like to use is that sandals is a success. When you look at their marketing, Madam Speaker, the marketing of sandals, you turn on your BBC over... No. When you look at the BBC programs, looking at cable, the ads that are running.
Members, I would like to hear the contribution. Members, please. I'm on my legs. Is it, member? Is this a standing order? Point that you're going to raise? But both of us can't be standing at the same time. Please. I have not recognized you, member. Members, I would like to hear the contribution of the Honourable Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and I would ask members please to observe the rule with respect to silence.
Madam Speaker, I stand at 48-4. There was insulting language across the floor from Maruga Tableland.
Yes, I heard it.
And member for Caroni East, maybe if there was not so much murmur in the chamber, I would have heard it too. I haven't heard anything. Please continue.
You're making it.
Member, please. You're too senior member. I have ruled, and I would appreciate if we continue with members observing the rule with silence. Continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they seem to be very nervous on that other side because they recognize the stimulation it would have not only to the economy of Tobago, but the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Because what it will also do is it will mean a larger influx of foreign exchange. It will mean the growth of the local tourism industry in Tobago. They are talking about a commitment of utilizing, obviously, the local tour operators who they certify for health and safety, etc. So the point, Madam Speaker, in a nutshell is, this is a project that we endorse. This is a project that we are having conversations with regard to, and on our assessment and the assessment of every right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular Tobago, it will bring a lot of positive to our economies. And the attitude of trying to fearmonger and the attitude of trying to attack those who are coming to invest on our economy will not be tolerated by this government. And having said that, Madam Speaker, when we came into office, the downstreamers in the energy sector and the upstreamers came running to us, knocking on our doors, telling us for the last 5 years they've been unable to have any productive conversation with those who were then in government. And they will now all say that they welcome the conversations that are currently taking place because they're the best for Trinidad and Tobago. Moving along, Madam Speaker, over the past year, when we came into government, we were faced with a number of big litigation matters. We were faced with a number of very suspicious transactions and transactions that were not what were in the best for Trinidad and Tobago. The first that we had to deal with, and in fact, it was on the eve of Christmas Eve, the 23rd of December, 2015, is we found something called the Beetham wastewater plant. And I want the public of Trinidad and Tobago to know that those on the other side spent $800 million of their cash-earned money on a wasted project. And that project, we immediately had to terminate the contractor, and we went for an injunction to prevent SIS, and we went for an injunction to prevent the dissipation of their assets. And we went for an injunction to prevent the dissipation of the assets. And what I'd like the public of Trinidad and Tobago to understand is this government managed some very, very heavy litigation in their best interest. So rather than allow SIS to dissipate its assets, we went to court, we froze the assets, and we're going all the way to the Privy Council if necessary on that. Another
Madam Speaker, let me have a contribution, please. Or approach west or east.
Member, is this a standing order you wish to raise?
Madam Speaker, I appeal to you for your assistance.
Continue, please, member. For
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, in the management of litigation and things like the Beetham wastewater plant, the Maracas Bay project, then there was a $1 billion claim filed by one contractor. One contractor filed a $1 billion claim against a state enterprise in Trinidad and Tobago. And one questions, how can a contractor actually have such a large cash flow that they can manage themselves $1 billion over a period of time? And that, yes, the contractor and the award of the contract did fall under Oropuch East at the time. What we've managed to do with that piece of litigation is we've put a very, very experienced team, legal team in place, and as will be filed very shortly in the courts, and it will become public very shortly in the courts. We've turned that whole claim around, and I'm happy to report to the public of Trinidad and Tobago that from $1 billion claim against them and the taxpayers of this country, it will turn out to a counterclaim substantiated with hard, independent expert evidence of approximately $200 million against the contractor. A complete reversal of rule. They've sued us for $1 billion, and on the eve of the court hearing, ran to say, let's take it out of court. We want to go to private arbitration, so it'll all be done in secret. And we gave the instructions, you've brought a claim to the High Court, that's in public. You prosecute your claim in the High Court, and we will fight you in the High Court. And we've now managed, Madam Speaker.
I rise on standing order 48-2, and if the matters are before the courts.
I do not rule that these matters are sub judice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And what will happen, again they become nervous, what will happen is the taxpayers now stand to recover against the contractor, and a contract awarded by Oropuch East, who had the audacity to bring a claim against us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, for $1 billion. We will now take them to court in their same matter for $200 million, and let's see who will succeed at the end of the day. Madam Speaker, I expect another person to jump up. Let's see who it is on this occasion. OAS, the building of the Point 14 Highway. Madam Speaker, a few months ago I came to this chamber and I delivered a ministerial statement to let the public of Trinidad and Tobago know what was going on with the contractor OAS. That the world at large knew that in March 2015, OAS had found itself caught up in a scandal in Brazil and had found itself in judicial management. Judicial management to the lay person, what it means is a filing of some type of insolvency or bankruptcy. And what that meant is at the time, the government and the NIDCO board that came from the former administration, in our view, should have terminated the contract because it is the cleanest way to terminate a FIDIC-type contract on the basis that there's bankruptcy. The cleanest way. And what did they do? What did they do instead, Madam Speaker? On the eve of the election and the amount of work that they did, on the 4th of September, which was the Friday before, the 5th of September, the 6th of September, and on the 7th of September, they didn't do for the whole 5 years. On the 4th of September, those on the other side took the patrimony of Trinidad and Tobago, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, took our children's future and gambled it away. They entered into contract addendum number 2.
48.4,
They can
48.6, Madam Speaker.
The whole of 48.
The whole of 48, gamble it away.
Member, is it 48-4?
48 for offensive.
I don't rule that there's been any offensive or insulting language.
Well, I stand out 48.6, Madam Speaker.
Yes. We
Member for Diego Martin West, I'm on my legs. Members, I don't rule that there has been any improper motive ascribed to any member of this House. Please continue.
very much, Madam Speaker. I did predict that I would be interrupted and jump up, and I haven't even gotten to the crux of it as yet. On the 4th of September, those on the other side authorized the signing of an agreement called Contract Addendum 2 with OAS that waived, discharged, gave away in layman's terms the right of Trinidad and Tobago to terminate the contract with OAS on the basis that they were in judicial management. I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand that those on the other side have exposed you now to hundreds of millions of dollars in claims by OAS. Those on the other side, rather than terminate the contract in the single cleanest manner because OAS was in judicial management, instead, on the 4th of September, the Friday before a general election, had the audacity to go and wipe the slate clean, give OAS a get-out-of-jail card. Those on the other side. And that's what the future generations now have to live with the Point Fortin Highway. Billions of dollars in cash. Right, those on the other side. No loan financing, no IDB loan, no nothing. They spent about $5 billion in cash of our future generations' money for a company where they could have terminated it in March last year, but on the 4th of September, sensing, of course, as we see on that weekend, that they were about to lose a general election because the right-thinking members of society had had enough of them, they signed it away. They signed it away, Madam Speaker. Now, what did we do on this side? We came in, we hired a top-class set of legal advisors and independent advisors. We terminated OAS in July of this year after some level of difficulty. And then to date, I'm happy to report to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we have recovered to date $671 million. And I heard the member for Tabakit, who is not present here, and the noise that's taking place on that side of the chamber. I heard them say, oh, it was standby letters of credit, that was correlate, and not true, Madam Speaker, because what happened, apart from one bank, Citibank, who when we called on the standby letters of credit, Citibank immediately paid us $282.8 million. The others decided they would take us to court. And not take us to court in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, but in the commercial courts of London.
And Brazil.
So what did we do? We took them to court. And what we did, and I'm happy to report, through a very tight management of that litigation, we managed to recover over $400 million for Trinidad and Tobago. And it took us less than 2 months to do so. There's one more remaining case against one of these international banks that will come up in November in the commercial courts of London. And we expect on that day, we file for summary judgment against them. we expect to recover the last $300 million for Trinidad and Tobago. So, Madam Speaker, this is what we've been doing for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Carney East, do you intend to make an interruption? All right. Thank you very much. Continue.
Thank you very much. We come to the issue of corruption. Madam Speaker, what I'd like to say with respect to corruption is it was recognized very early internationally that this administration, led by the Honorable Prime Minister, the member for Diego Martin West, would take a certain stance against corruption. And when the Prime Minister went to Malta, none other than the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, at the time David Cameron, sought out our Prime Minister and invited our participation in something called the Anti-Corruption Summit, which was held in London 2016. We were the only small state to be represented at this Anti-Corruption Summit. And I was fortunate enough to participate in it along with the Prime Minister. And what I want the public of Trinidad and Tobago to know today is this is what Trinidad and Tobago, under this Prime Minister, has committed us to internationally at that summit. That we will expose corruption. Trinidad and Tobago is committed to the fight against the scourge of corruption and to pursuing those who have engaged in acts of corruption with a goal of successful prosecution and in recovering as many assets that are the fruits of corruption for the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We are on record, Madam Speaker, saying that Trinidad and Tobago is willing to participate in legitimate global initiatives that are focused on simplifying the gathering and collating of evidence and the building of successful cases leading to the prosecution of those who engage in corrupt acts. Trinidad and Tobago is open and committed to assisting its international partners in the fight against corruption. Trinidad and Tobago will work towards the establishing of a registry of company beneficial ownership information. We've heard the Attorney General talk about that. Trinidad and Tobago commits to ensuring that law enforcement agencies have full and effective access to beneficial ownership information for companies and other legal entities registered within its jurisdiction. Trinidad and Tobago is open to implementing bilateral arrangements that will ensure law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago have full and effective access to the beneficial ownership information of companies incorporated in other countries. Madam Speaker, the short point is that we gave a commitment internationally that these are the things that we're going to do. And I'm happy to report to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the persons who've elected us as your government, that we are very, very much afoot. And it's important to understand at this juncture, respectfully, Madam Speaker, that as a government, as an Attorney General, a Ministry of the Attorney General, we are not in charge of police investigations. We are not in charge of prosecutions. Charges, criminal charges that can be laid, are laid by the TTPS, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and by the Director of Public Prosecutions. But where we give our commitment and where we have been working assiduously is in the provision of resources to those who must investigate, in the provision of assistance through international agencies who we've been meeting with, international law enforcement agencies around the globe who have given a commitment to this government and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to assist us in tracking the assets, finding the proceeds of crime, and the people who are in possession of the proceeds of crime. And that work has continued, and that work is afoot. And that work will come to fruition. And Madam Speaker, the point is that these international agencies like the NCA in the United Kingdom, the FBI in the United States, the RMCP, the Royal Mounted Police Branch in Canada, and others have provided us with their commitment, and have gone further. They're willing to commit resources because they see us as being serious in our fight against corruption. And what I'd like the public of Trinidad and Tobago to understand today, Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect is, we as a government are not the ones who investigate it. That's for the police service. But we will work and we will partner with them and we will support them to get the job done in the right way. And then the laying of criminal charges by the police service and the Director of Public Prosecutions may or it may not come. But what I stand here without fear of contradiction today to say to the public of Trinidad and Tobago is this government has committed itself internationally, it is on record, and it is happening in the fight against corruption. Madam Speaker, in addition to these initiatives that have been taking place over the past year, what we've also been hard at work on is issues such as local government reform. I heard a reference to it a short while ago. And we're happy to stand here today and say we had a very successful 14 or 15 public consultations for the first time across the whole breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. And recently, a few weeks ago, the Cabinet has now approved the policy for the local government reform, and we shall be bringing the legislation. I personally am working on it within the first quarter of next year for this new local government reform. We've also been working on issues with our upstream and our downstream players in Trinidad and Tobago. And for the first time in years, they've told us that there were a number of contracts that had expired, both upstream and downstream. There were a number of conversations and negotiations that should have been taking place, that were not taking place under the former administration. We've re-engaged the Energy Standing Committee, the Minister of Energy, and the Prime Minister have been very hard at work in ensuring a return of stability to our energy sector, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy to announce that is exactly what has been taking place over the past year. Madam Speaker, I saw, if I may now turn to the issue of FATF, FATCA, and CFATF. I saw an article in the Daily Express newspaper of Monday, the 10th of October, being given, it's quoting a talk being given by the head of the Bankers Association, the CEO of Scotiabank, Anya Schooner, where she is quoted as saying, or telling the government we must refocus as soon as the budget is over on FATCA legislation, and saying, don't worry with FATCA, you know. Well, worry with FATCA, but there are also bigger issues to do with FATF and CFATF and anti-money laundering, and you must go with the insurance bill, etc. I found it a little strange for this reason, that the Bankers Association decided now is the time, all of a sudden they found their voice. With FATCA legislation, as we all now know, it was something that should have been done since 2010.
Honourable Member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, your original 45 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 10 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself of it. You may proceed.
I do. Thank you. So, Madam Speaker, what we have said, and I'm going on record here saying it again, is there are 23 votes on this side. The FATCA legislation requires a special majority, and I'm telling the head of the Bankers Association, the head of every Chamber of Commerce, the head of every association out there, the PNM is committed and you have 23 votes here. It is those on the other side. Go and have the conversations with those on the other side.
That, I hope that the member is not anticipating the debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Again, we see the nervousness. The point is, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, when it comes to special...
Members, Chaguanas West, I am sure the member for St. Anne's, Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, will be guided by what you've just said. Please continue.
Thank you very much. It has absolutely nothing to do with a debate. Between now and when the debate takes place, what I would like to suggest to the head of the Bankers Association and others, go and engage those on the opposite side in conversation. Because we have done what we've done. You have 23 votes here. And that leads me, Madam Speaker. You've seen the legislation. I put on record here in this House now, Madam Speaker, at this stage, Bankers Association and others take note. Those on the other side have not proposed a single amendment to the FATCA legislation. Not a single amendment. I heard them, Madam Speaker, I heard them yesterday talk about full-page ads. Full-page ads by Ministry of Rural Development. And Orapuch East quoting $45,000 for a full-page ad. tell the members and the population of Trinidad and Tobago, you've not engaged in a single amendment with the legislation, but you took out a full-page ad at their cost, at the cost of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, right, to play politics. Additionally, what we heard yesterday, and the only thing I would allow myself to quote from the member of Oropuch East's contribution yesterday, and I want the public to hear this. The member for Oropuch East yesterday said, anytime they speak now, they threaten, they come to Parliament 1 year now talking about ghost workers. You did not hear nothing about that for 1 year, in his normal mannerism. I stand here today and tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, as the Attorney General was debating that last year in Aparima, it was sent to the fraud squad. Correct. So last year, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs sent the report, Madam Speaker, to the fraud squad of Trinidad and Tobago, because as I've said recently, it is not for a government to lay charges or to do the investigation. So it has already been sent. Now, what he also went on to say, and Madam Speaker, the population of Trinidad and Tobago will judge this now. They'll judge it at local government elections.
Again, it's just about 7 more minutes before the break. If it is that you may be a bit restless, you're again invited. You can therefore take a little walk and come back. But please, in the meantime, maintain the decorum of this House. Continue.
You have no legitimacy to speak about.
As regards 48.5, and I believe in the course of this debate, and maybe Oropuch East, you may have been not in the chamber at the time. While 48.5 refers to referring to a member by his portfolio or his constituency, in good sense, one could not at every juncture say member for Kuva South or member for Oropuch East, so that I would allow a certain amount of he or she, the pronoun, which is really valid in ordinary English language. I will determine sometimes what it means. Once it's not meant to denigrate a member. Continue, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This was a contribution of Oropuch East. It's the only thing I'm allowing myself to quote from Oropuch East yesterday. And I'm now going to tell the public of Trinidad and Tobago, because I have the Bankers Association, I have the Chamber of Commerce. They focus on a point called the Revenue Authority. And everybody, every right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago is calling for the Revenue Authority. We heard the member for Chaguanas West ask about it this morning. I'm putting the country respectfully on notice. The Revenue Authority is supported by the 23 votes on this side. The Revenue Authority is supported by a P&M administration because it will raise the efficiency in the collection of tax. It can help towards the eradication of corruption. Trinidad and Tobago, right-thinking citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I beseech you to look at those on the opposite side to see if they will support such a good venture, which can only redound for the benefit of the future generations of Trinidad and Tobago. I've also heard, and let me tell you what the member for Oropuch East said in response to that yesterday. He said, now when they talk assets forfeiture, and yes, we are bringing civil asset forfeiture legislation. We are bringing civil asset forfeiture legislation. We're bringing Trinidad and Tobago legislation called Explain Your Wealth. So if you can't explain your wealth, the assets that you have will be seized by the state. That legislation is coming. And listen to what Oropuch East said yesterday. Now, when they...
Please. And this is the last time that I'll be on my legs. Member for Digomati Northwest, I'm on my legs. Northeast, sorry, I'm on my legs. Members, please continue. Member for Portisby North St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago will look on today, and they will note where the interruptions came. They will note from whom the interruptions came. And they will mark that today with a highlighter to see what the future brings. Because civil asset forfeiture legislation is coming, explain your wealth legislation. And let me just put on record for the second time, Madam Speaker, what Oropouche East said in relation to that. The member for Oropouche East. He said, now when they talk asset forfeiture, we going after, we chasing the money, we following the money. Who you following? Who following the money? By yourself? You following it, laws passed here. This is the important point that I put Trinidad and Tobago on notice. He then said, you have the majority to pass anything? In other words, no commitment from that side. They intend to block the Revenue Authority. They intend to block civil asset forfeiture. They intend to block, follow the money and explain your wealth. In the few moments that I have left, Madam Speaker, I'd like to touch very, very briefly for the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago and Chaguanas Development Authority. Chaguanas Development Authority, an investigation was done. We found a number of leases, and the evidence that we've gathered is a number of leases being granted on the night before elections. The chairman had persons busy until 2, 3 a.m., which is now on the 7th of September. So he started on the 6th to the 7th of September, signing leases.
Senator Solomon.
We as a government intend, Madam Speaker, to challenge those leases in law and to go all the way to the Privy Council. Because what we believe that was illegal land grabbing taking place, because the land in Trinidad and Tobago is for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And when we've looked, Madam Speaker, at the commercial terms of these leases signed on the night before elections into the wee hours of the morning of elections, we found that they're not in the best commercial terms for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we intend to challenge those leases in court, Madam Speaker. We've also heard, Madam Speaker, in wrapping up, I'd like to use the opportunity to just talk very briefly about my constituency, Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. Over the past year, I've continued walking in the constituency, meeting with the constituents, and not sitting in an office necessarily to hear what is going on. We've also had health fairs, we've also had we've had legal aid clinics, we've done a number of initiatives, homework centers, etc. And what we intend to do, we've been having struggles with water. I'd like to thank WASA for working so closely and carefully with Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West to try and alleviate that situation. Madam Speaker, I continue to give my commitment to not only Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, not only the government led by the Honourable Member for Diego Martin West, but to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the future citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, to our children on this side and our grandchildren on this side, as well as the children and grandchildren on the other side, to do what is best for Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Members, I think at this time we'll take the suspension for lunch, and this House is suspended until 1:30.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament. You're viewing the Parliament